You're not ugly at all. The human girl hugged and kissed the hatchling, or Part 2. The morning sun cast long shadows across the crystalline spires of the Drakmori Academy, as 11-year-old Lily Stone practiced her aerial maneuvers with Spark high above the training grounds. Her dragon companion, now the size of a small horse with scales that shimmered like polished emeralds, executed a perfect barrel roll while she clung to the specialized saddle Dr. Stone had designed for their flights together. Show off. Lily laughed as Spark performed an impossible twist that defied several laws of physics. Even after 5 years together, his abilities continued to amaze her. The bond they shared had evolved far beyond anything the Drakmori had ever documented between rider and dragon, where traditional dragon-rider relationships were built on mutual respect and shared combat experience. Lily and Spark operated as two halves of the same mind. They landed gracefully on the Academy's main platform, where other young Drakmori students were ending their morning exercises with their own dragon partners. The sight that greeted them would have been impossible just 6 years ago. Dragons and riders working together not as weapons of war, but as partners in learning and discovery. Lily Stone. "Report to Headmaster Corvain's office immediately," announced a voice over the Academy's communication system. The mechanical tone carried an urgency that made several students look up from their training routines. Spark rumbled low in his throat, a sound that had evolved from his original purring into something like concerned questioning. Lily scratched behind his ear ridges, feeling his emotions echo through their bond. Neither of them could remember being summoned to the headmaster's office for anything urgent. "It's probably nothing, boy," she said, though her own heart rate had quickened.
"Maybe they want to talk about my xenobiology project again." They made their way through corridors lined with murals depicting traditional Drakmori victories in battle.
But interspersed among the war scenes were newer additions, images of the historic first contact with humans, the peaceful resolution of the Void Screamer crisis, and prominently featured a small human girl reaching out to touch the snout of a frightened dragon hatchling. Lily still felt embarrassed seeing herself immortalized in stone and crystal, but the Drakmori insisted the moment belonged in their history, alongside their greatest military triumphs. Headmaster Corvain stood at the window of his office when they arrived, his massive frame silhouetted against the view of the Academy grounds. Even by Drakmori standards, he was imposing, nearly 8 feet tall with ceremonial scars marking his arms and the traditional warrior's crest embedded in his skull. But Lily had learned to read the subtle signs of his moods, and today something was troubling him. "Ah, young Lily," he said without turning around. "And Spark, please come in. We have received most interesting news from the Galactic Council." Spark settled onto the specially reinforced floor padding while Lily took the human-sized chair that had been installed specifically for her use. The gesture was small, but it represented the countless accommodations the Drakmori had made to welcome humanity into their culture. "The Council has announced the first interspecies youth competition," Corvain continued, finally turning to face them. His expression was carefully neutral, but Lily could see the conflict in his golden eyes. "Representatives from major civilizations will gather to demonstrate problem-solving abilities, cultural understanding, and collaborative skills. It is intended to foster greater cooperation among the younger generation." Lily felt a flutter of excitement in her chest. "That sounds amazing. What kinds of challenges will there be?" "That information has not been disclosed," Corvain replied. "The competition organizers believe that advanced knowledge might allow participants to prepare specific solutions rather than demonstrate genuine adaptability." He paused, studying both Lily and Spark with the intensity of a military strategist evaluating troops. "The Drakmori Council has decided to nominate you and Spark as our representatives." The words hung in the air like a physical weight. Lily felt Spark's surprise mirror her own through their bond. Of all the possibilities she had imagined, representing an entire civilization had never occurred to her. "But sir," she said carefully, "I'm not really Drakmori. I'm human, and I've only been here for 5 years. Surely there are better candidates." "That is precisely why you are the ideal choice," Corvain interrupted. "You represent something new in our culture. The bond you share with Spark has challenged every assumption we held about the relationship between rider and dragon. You have shown us that strength comes not from domination, but from partnership." Through the office window, Lily could see other students continuing their training exercises. Many of them had been here far longer than she had, learning traditional Drakmori combat techniques and strategic thinking. The idea of representing their entire culture felt overwhelming. However, Corvain continued, his voice taking on a more somber tone, I must warn you that not all members of the council support this decision. Some believe that sending a human child will make us appear weak to other civilizations. They argue that our reputation as warriors will suffer if our representative wins through compassion, rather than strength. Spark raised his head and fixed the headmaster with an intense stare. The sound he made was complex, part growl, part inquiry, and entirely protective. Lily placed a calming hand on his neck, feeling his indignation at the suggestion that their approach was somehow inferior. What do you think, sir? Lily asked. Do you believe compassion is weakness? Corvain's scarred face broke into what might have been a smile. I have seen you calm a berserk void screamer with nothing but patience and understanding. I have watched Spark solve tactical problems that stumped our most experienced war planners. If that is weakness, then perhaps our definition of strength needs adjustment. The compliment warmed Lily, but it also emphasized the weight of expectation now resting on her shoulders. She would not just be competing as herself, she would be representing everything that Drakmori had learned about cooperation and partnership since her arrival. When does the competition begin? She asked. Transportation to Nexus Prime departs in 3 days, Corvain replied. Your mother has already been notified and will accompany you as part of the diplomatic escort. She is currently making arrangements with the Xenobiology department. 3 days to prepare for a competition that could influence how entire civilizations viewed cooperation and strength. 3 days to ready themselves for challenges they couldn't anticipate against opponents they had never met. Lily looked down at Spark, who was watching her with the same golden eyes that had first met hers in that cargo bay years ago. Then he had been a frightened hatchling seeking comfort. Now he was her partner, her friend, and together they carried the hopes of a species that had learned to value love alongside honor. We accept, she said simply. And in that moment, both girl and dragon felt the first stirring of an adventure that would test everything they had learned about the power of connection, in a universe that too often chose division. Nexus Prime sprawled across the horizon like a jeweled crown, its crystalline spires and floating platforms designed to accommodate the wildly different environmental needs of dozens of species. As their transport approached the main docking facility, Lily pressed her face to the viewport, marveling at the sight of beings she had only read about in her xenobiology texts moving freely among each other. It's beautiful, she whispered to Spark, who had positioned himself to look out the window beside her. His response was a low harmonic that conveyed wonder mixed with careful alertness, the same combination of emotions flowing through Lily. Herself, Dr. Stone moved from her seat across the transport cabin to join them at the window. The past 5 years had changed her as much as they had changed Lily. Where once she had been a traditional human xenobiologist studying alien cultures from the outside, she now served as a cultural liaison, helping species understand each other through the lessons learned from Lily and Spark's impossible friendship. Remember what we discussed, she said quietly. You're not here to prove anything to anyone. You're here to be yourselves and show what cooperation can accomplish. The transport settled into its assigned docking bay with barely a tremor. Within minutes, they were walking through corridors filled with beings that represented the full spectrum of galactic civilization. Lily counted at least 12 different species in their immediate vicinity, some crystalline and geometric, others flowing like living water, and several that defied easy categorization. Their escort, a diplomatic aide from the Galactic Council, led them toward the competition staging area. As they walked, Lily became aware of the attention they were attracting. Conversations paused as they passed, and she could feel curious gazes following their group. Is that the human child? Someone whispered in a language that Spark's enhanced hearing picked up and translated through their bond. The one who tamed the dragon, came another voice. I heard they communicate telepathically, added a third speaker. Lily tried to ignore the comments, but she could feel her cheeks warming. Even here, among representatives of advanced civilizations, she was still the oddity, the human girl who had befriended a creature meant for war. The staging area opened into a vast amphitheater where other competition participants were gathering with their advisors. Lily's attention was immediately drawn to her fellow competitors, each representing the best their civilizations had to offer. The crystalline hegemony had sent Zara 9, a being whose geometric body pulsed with internal light as she processed information at superhuman speeds. Every movement she made was precise and calculated, and when she spoke to her advisors, her voice carried the confidence of someone accustomed to having access to perfect information. From the Aquatic Federation came reef singer Tidal, whose translator allowed the flowing musical tones of his underwater language to be understood by air-breathing species. He moved with the fluid grace of someone equally at home in 3 dimensions, and his large, empathetic eyes seemed to take in every detail of his surroundings while maintaining focus on his team of advisors. The machine collective had contributed Logic Prime 7, an android whose sleek form and glowing optical sensors gave him an almost predatory appearance. Unlike the others, he stood alone, processing the competition parameters without need for consultation or emotional support. And then there was Lily, the youngest competitor by several years, accompanied by a dragon that most species still classified somewhere between mythical creature and weapons platform. She felt suddenly, acutely aware of how different she and Spark were from everyone else present. Competition Director Vex Null, a being whose species Lily couldn't identify, called for attention as the orientation began. Competitors will face 3 challenges over the next week, the director announced through universal translators. Each test is designed to evaluate problem-solving abilities, cultural adaptability, and collaborative potential. The first challenge begins immediately. Holographic displays materialized around the amphitheater, showing what appeared to be a disaster scenario, a crashed transport vessel surrounded by dangerous terrain and environmental hazards. Your objective is simple, Vex Null continued. Rescue the survivors trapped in the wreckage. You will have access to standard emergency equipment, but the nature of the hazards and survivors will require adaptive thinking. The display zoomed in on the crash site, revealing movement within the wreckage. Lily squinted at the thermal signatures, trying to make out details of the survivors they were supposed to rescue. Then her blood ran cold. The heat signatures were wrong, too large, too aggressive in their movement patterns. These weren't ordinary crash survivors. As the simulation became clearer, she could make out distinctive features that made her heart race. Elongated limbs, predatory postures, and the unmistakable silhouette of creatures that most of the galaxy considered nightmares. Void screamers, she breathed. Spark's reaction was immediate and protective. His scales shifted to a darker hue as battle instincts engaged, but Lily could feel through their bond that his response wasn't fear. It was recognition. He remembered their previous encounter with the species that had nearly destroyed Meridian Point, before Lily had discovered their true nature. Around the amphitheater, other competitors were already formulating strategies. Zara 9's crystalline form pulsed rapidly as she calculated optimal rescue protocols. Tidal consulted with his advisors about aquatic extraction techniques that might be adapted for the terrain. Logic Prime 7 stood motionless, but Lily could see his optical sensors cycling through different analysis modes. None of them understood what they were really looking at. The survivors appear to be members of an unknown species, Vex Null added with what might have been deliberate understatement. Previous rescue attempts have resulted in aggressive behavior from both the survivors and the rescue teams. Exercise appropriate caution. Lily felt Dr. Stone's hand settle on her shoulder. You don't have to do this, her mother whispered. We can withdraw from the competition. But Lily was already shaking her head. Through the display, she could see smaller heat signatures clustered protectively behind the larger ones. Families. Parents protecting their young in a situation they didn't understand, surrounded by would-be rescuers who saw them as monsters. They're not aggressive because they're evil, she said, loud enough that other competitors turned to look at her. They're aggressive because they're scared. Zara 9's crystalline form rotated to focus on Lily. You have encountered this species before? Yes, Lily replied simply. And they're not monsters. They're people. The statement sent ripples of conversation through the gathering. Void screamers had been classified as dangerous predators for as long as most civilizations had known of their existence. The suggestion that they might be sentient, intelligent beings challenged fundamental assumptions about galactic xenobiology. Interesting theory, Logic Prime 7 observed, his optical sensors focusing on Lily with mechanical precision. However, empirical evidence suggests extreme caution when approaching unknown hostile entities. They're only hostile because everyone treats them like monsters, Lily replied. feeling Spark's support flowing through their bond. What if the real test isn't about rescue techniques? What if it's about understanding? Competition Director Vex Null observed the exchange with apparent interest. Competitors will have 1 hour to complete the rescue scenario, was all the additional guidance provided. As the other teams began preparing their equipment and strategies, Lily found herself looking at the problem from an entirely different angle. Everyone else was planning a rescue mission. She was planning a first contact scenario. "Spark," she said quietly. "Remember how frightened you were when we first met? Remember how everyone else saw a monster, but I saw a scared baby?" Spark's responding rumble carried layers of memory and understanding. He remembered being lost and confused on Meridian Point, surrounded by beings who feared him. He remembered the moment when one small human had looked past his sharp teeth and armored scales to see the lonely child beneath. Now, watching the heat signatures of the Void Screamers protecting their young in the wreckage, both girl and dragon recognized a familiar pattern. The test was about to begin, but Lily suspected the real challenge wouldn't be rescuing survivors. It would be convincing the galaxy that sometimes the monsters they feared were just families trying to protect each other. The news of Lily's successful first contact with the Void Screamers spread through galactic communication networks like wildfire. Within hours of the competition broadcast, diplomatic channels were flooding with urgent messages, academic institutions were demanding access to the recordings, and military strategists were questioning decades of defensive protocols. Lily sat in her assigned quarters on Nexus Prime, watching the feeds with a mixture of amazement and growing unease. The peaceful resolution of the rescue scenario, where she had simply sat down among the frightened Void Screamers and hummed a lullaby until they calmed enough to accept help, was being analyzed frame by experts across the galaxy. The Hegemony Council is calling for immediate reclassification of Void Screamers as a protected sentient species, Dr. Stone reported, scrolling through messages on her communication device. The Aquatic Federation wants to establish formal diplomatic contact. Even the Machine Collective is requesting data on non-logical problem resolution methods. Spark lay curled around Lily's chair, his scales reflecting the soft lighting of their quarters. Through their bond, she could feel his confusion at the intensity of the galactic response. To him, what they had done was simply natural. Approach with kindness, listen with empathy, and respond with love rather than fear. "I don't understand why everyone is so surprised," Lily said. "We've known for years that different species communicate in different ways. Maybe we just needed to listen better." A soft chime indicated an incoming communication request. Dr. Stone accepted the call, and the holographic display resolved into the familiar figure of Headmaster Corvain. Even across the vast distance between Nexus Prime and the Drakmori homeworld, Lily could see tension in his posture. "Lily, my child," he said without preamble, "you have accomplished something remarkable, but the political implications are becoming complex. The Drakmori High Council is facing pressure from several directions." "What kind of pressure?" Dr. Stone asked, though Lily suspected she already knew. "Some council members believe that highlighting your peaceful methods undermines our reputation as a warrior culture," Corvain explained. "They argue that other species will view us as weak if our representative succeeds through compassion rather than strength. There are calls to distance the Drakmori from your approach." Lily felt her stomach drop. She had always known that her presence among the Drakmori was controversial, but she had hoped that 5 years of success would have proven the value of their partnership. "And what do you think?" she asked quietly. Corvain's expression softened slightly. "I think that anyone who considers your abilities to be weakness has never watched you face down a berserk Void Screamer with nothing but courage and understanding. However, politics is rarely concerned with truth." Before Lily could respond, another communication request interrupted the call. This one bore the priority codes of the competition organizers. "Ms. Stone," came the voice of Competition Director Vex Null, "your presence is requested for an emergency meeting of all competitors and their advisors. The nature of the remaining challenges has been modified in light of recent developments. The amphitheater felt different when they assembled for the emergency meeting. Where before there had been competitive energy and curiosity, now there was tension and uncertainty." The other competitors studied Lily with expressions that ranged from respect to suspicion to calculation. Zara 9's crystalline form pulsed in rapid, agitated patterns. The revelation of Void Screamer sentience has created cascading effects throughout the crystalline hegemony's xenobiological databases, she announced without preamble. 17 other species classifications are now under review. Our entire approach to unknown contacts may require fundamental revision. Title's flowing responses came through his translator with unusual urgency. The Aquatic Federation has suspended all military protocols against Void Screamers, pending formal diplomatic assessment. Defense fleets are being redirected. Trade routes are being re-evaluated. The economic implications alone are staggering. Logic Prime 7 turned his optical sensors toward Lily with something that might have been mechanical curiosity. Your methods defy standard logical analysis. The probability of successful peaceful contact with a classified hostile species should have been approximately 0.003%. Yet you achieved positive results through approaches that our strategic algorithms cannot quantify. Maybe that's the problem, Lily replied, feeling Spark's steady presence beside her. Maybe you can't quantify everything that matters. Competition Director Vex Null raised a manipulator appendage for attention. The discovery of Void Screamer sentience has revealed a more significant concern. Preliminary communications with their representatives have produced disturbing information about galactic history. The amphitheater's displays activated, showing star charts and timeline data that made Lily's eyes widen. Ancient trade routes, historical conflicts, and species migration patterns painted a picture that was deeply troubling. The Void Screamers possess generational memories spanning millennia, Vex Null continued. Their accounts suggest that the increase in interspecies conflict over the past several thousand years may not be entirely natural. They describe a pattern of civilizations becoming increasingly aggressive and isolationist over time. Dr. Stone leaned forward in her seat. Are you suggesting external influence? The possibility cannot be dismissed, Vex Null replied. The Void Screamers' oldest memories speak of a time when cooperation between species was more common. They describe the gradual change as a growing shadow that makes civilizations fear what they once embraced. Lily felt a chill that had nothing to do with the amphitheater's climate control. You think something has been making species more afraid of each other? It would explain certain anomalies, Zara 9 interjected, her form pulsing in rapid calculation modes. The crystalline hegemony's historical records show a measurable decrease in successful diplomatic initiatives over the past 3 millennia. We attributed this to natural evolution of strategic thinking, but external influence could account for the statistical variance. Title's translator conveyed deep concern as he spoke. The Aquatic Federation has noticed similar patterns. Our ancestors' records speak of greater trust between species in ancient times. We assumed this was romanticized history, but perhaps it was accurate memory. Logic Prime 7's optical sensors dimmed slightly, what Lily was beginning to recognize as his equivalent of thoughtful consideration. If an external force has been promoting conflict and isolationism, then Ms. Stone's methods represent a form of resistance to this influence. Her success with the Void Screamers may indicate natural immunity to whatever has been affecting galactic politics. Or maybe, Lily said quietly, love is just stronger than fear, even when something is trying to make us afraid. The statement hung in the air like a challenge to everything the assembled civilizations thought. They knew about galactic history and their own natures. The competition will continue, Vex Null announced, but with modified objectives. We are no longer simply testing individual abilities. We are investigating whether cooperative methods can overcome influences that may have been shaping galactic civilization for millennia. As the meeting disbanded, Lily found herself approached by each of the other competitors. Zara 9's crystalline form rotated to face her directly. I request permission to study your problem-solving methodology, she said. The crystalline hegemony's survival may depend on understanding approaches that transcend pure logic. Title's translator conveyed what sounded like musical appreciation. The Aquatic Federation would be honored to learn from your techniques. Perhaps together we can remember what our species once knew about cooperation. Even Logic Prime 7 approached, his optical sensors focusing on her with mechanical precision. Your methods challenge fundamental assumptions in my programming. I find this intriguing. Perhaps logic alone is insufficient for optimal problem resolution. As they returned to their quarters, Lily looked up at Spark, feeling the weight of galactic expectations settling on her shoulders like a heavy cloak. We're not just competing anymore, are we? She asked. Spark's response was a complex harmonic that conveyed understanding, determination, and absolute loyalty. Through their bond, she felt his certainty that whatever they were facing, they would face it together. But as Lily drifted off to sleep that night, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to discover something that would change not just the competition, but the entire galaxy's understanding of what it meant to be civilized. The archaeological site hung in the void between stars like a crystalline tumor, its twisted spires and impossible geometries defying conventional understanding of physics and architecture. As their transport approached the ancient ruins, Lily pressed herself against the viewport, trying to make sense of structures that seemed to shift and change when she wasn't looking directly at them. The Harbinger Ruins, Competition Director Vex Null announced through the ship's communication system. One of 17 known sites scattered across the galaxy. All attempts at comprehensive exploration have ended in failure. Teams either abandon their missions or turn on each other in violent confrontations. Spark rumbled uneasily beside Lily, his scales shifting to deeper, more protective hues. Through their bond, she could feel his instinctive discomfort with the place. It wasn't fear exactly, but a deep wrongness that seemed to emanate from the ruins like radiation. "Why are we going there if it's so dangerous?" asked Tidal, his musical voice carrying unusual tension through the translator. "Because," Vex Null replied. "The Void Screamer's memories suggest that these ruins contain answers about the force that has been influencing galactic civilization. If we are to understand what has been promoting conflict and fear among our species, we must study its origins." Zara 9's crystalline form pulsed in rapid analysis patterns. Previous expedition reports describe increasing paranoia, aggression, and breakdown of team cohesion. The effect appears to intensify with proximity to the central structures. Logic Prime 7's optical sensors focused on the ruins with mechanical precision. Scanning reveals technological signatures unlike any in current databases. Energy patterns suggest active systems despite the site's apparent age. Recommendation: extreme caution advised. Dr. Stone moved to sit beside Lily, her expression troubled. "Sweetheart, if you feel uncomfortable about this at any point, we leave immediately." "No competition is worth risking your safety." Lily nodded, but her attention was fixed on the ruins. There was something about them that felt familiar, though she was certain she had never seen anything like them before. It was as if they reminded her of a nightmare she couldn't quite remember. Their transport docked with the temporary research station that had been established at a safe distance from the ruins. The station bustled with xenoarchaeologists, military advisors, and diplomatic observers from dozens of species, all maintaining careful professional distance from each other in a way that seemed oddly excessive. "The teams will enter the ruins together," Vex Null explained as they gathered in the station's briefing room. "Your objective is to reach the central chamber and document any technology or information that might explain the ruins' effects on visitors. You will maintain constant communication with the station and return immediately if any team member shows signs of psychological distress." The equipment check took an hour, with each competitor receiving personal protective gear, communication devices, and emergency beacons. Lily noticed that the station personnel seemed reluctant to make eye contact or engage in casual conversation, a stark contrast to the cooperative atmosphere that had characterized the early stages of the competition. As they prepared to depart for the ruins, Lily found herself studying her fellow competitors. Zara 9's usual confident precision had been replaced by rapid, almost agitated processing patterns. Tidal's flowing movements seemed more rigid, less trusting. Even Logic Prime 7 appeared to be running more defensive subroutines than usual. "Is it just me?" Lily asked Spark quietly. "Or does everyone seem more suspicious than before?" Spark's response carried layers of confirmation and concern. Through their bond, she realized he was sensing the same shift in everyone's behavior, a subtle but growing tendency toward isolation and distrust. The surface of the ruins felt wrong beneath their feet. The material looked like stone but rang like metal when struck, and it seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The architecture followed no logical pattern. Corridors branched in directions that shouldn't have been possible, and rooms opened onto spaces that couldn't fit within the structures they had seen from outside. "Fascinating construction methodology," Zara 9 observed. But her usual intellectual curiosity was tinged with something that sounded almost like suspicion. The builders clearly possessed technology far beyond current galactic standards. One wonders what happened to such an advanced civilization. Perhaps they destroyed themselves, Tidal replied, his translator conveying an uncharacteristic edge to his musical voice. Advanced technology without wisdom often leads to self-destruction. Or perhaps they were destroyed by someone who feared their capabilities, Logic Prime 7 added, his optical sensors scanning the corridor with obvious defensive protocols active. Lily noticed the way each comment seemed designed to promote mistrust rather than collaboration. More troubling, she found herself beginning to have similar thoughts, wondering if her fellow competitors might have hidden agendas, questioning whether the competition organizers were being completely honest about their objectives. "Spark," she whispered. "Something's wrong. I'm starting to think things that don't make sense." Spark pressed closer to her, his warm presence an anchor of familiar comfort in the increasingly alien environment. Through their bond, she felt his steady certainty and trust, which helped her recognize how her own thoughts were being subtly influenced. They continued deeper into the ruins, following corridors that seemed to shift when they weren't watching. The walls were covered with inscriptions in a script that defied translation, but the images were universal enough to be disturbing. Scenes of beings turning against each other, civilizations destroying themselves, and technology being used as a weapon against cooperation itself. "The inscriptions appear to be warnings," Zara 9 announced, but her voice carried an undertone that suggested she might be withholding information, or perhaps instructions. "The translation algorithms are producing conflicting interpretations." "Convenient," Tidal observed, his translator making the word sound like an accusation. "Perhaps some members of our team are more advanced in deciphering alien scripts than they admit." Logic Prime 7's optical sensors focused on both of them with mechanical intensity. Suspicion of team members' capabilities suggests psychological degradation, consistent with previous expedition reports. Recommendation: immediate withdrawal for psychological evaluation. "Or maybe," Lily said, her voice cutting through the growing tension, "the ruins are designed to make us distrust each other." The statement stopped all three competitors in their tracks. For a moment, the corridor was silent except for the subtle humming that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. "Explain," Zara 9 demanded, her crystalline form pulsing with rapid analysis patterns. Lily looked around at her companions, recognizing how their behavior had changed since entering the ruins. "Think about it. We were working together perfectly until we came here. Now we're all suspicious of each other, questioning motives, looking for hidden agendas. What if that's exactly what this place is designed to do?" Spark rumbled in agreement, his scales shifting to their natural emerald hue as he pressed against Lily's side. Through their bond, she felt his confirmation. The wrongness they had been sensing wasn't just environmental, it was psychological. "The Harbingers," she continued, pieces clicking together in her mind. "What if they didn't just build these ruins? What if they built them as weapons, not against other species but against cooperation itself?" The implications of her words seemed to ripple through the group like a physical force. Zara 9's processing patterns slowed to normal speeds. Tidal's movements became more fluid and trusting. Logic Prime 7's defensive subroutines scaled back to standard levels. "If you are correct," Logic Prime 7 said slowly, "then these ruins represent technology designed to promote conflict and isolation. The effects we are experiencing would be intended outcomes, not side effects." "But why would anyone build such a thing?" Tidal asked, his translator conveying genuine confusion. Lily looked ahead toward the central chamber, where the humming was strongest, and the walls seemed to pulse with malevolent energy. "Maybe we're about to find out." As they continued deeper into the ruins, Lily held tight to Spark's presence in her mind, using their bond as an anchor against the influence trying to turn them against each other. Whatever they found in the central chamber, she was determined to face it with love and trust rather than fear and suspicion. But with each step forward, the whispers in her mind grew stronger, promising her that cooperation was weakness, that trust was folly, and that the only way to survive was to strike first. The real test, she realized, wasn't about solving puzzles or overcoming challenges. It was about holding on to love in a place designed to teach the galaxy to hate. The central chamber of the Harbinger Ruins defied every law of physics Lily had ever learned. The space seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, with walls that curved impossibly inward, while somehow containing a room larger than the entire structure they had entered. At the center stood a crystalline construct that pulsed with dark energy, its faceted surface reflecting images that made no sense. Civilizations destroying themselves, species turning against former allies, and technology being perverted into instruments of isolation. By the deep currents, Tidal whispered, his translator barely able to convey the horror in his musical voice. What is this place? Zara 9's crystalline form had dimmed to barely visible levels as she processed the impossible geometry around them. The spatial mathematics are beyond current understanding. This chamber exists in folded spacetime, possibly connected to similar constructs across the galaxy. Logic Prime 7's optical sensors cycled rapidly through different analysis modes before settling on a configuration that Lily had never seen before, what looked almost like confusion. Error. Multiple conflicting readings. Unable to process environmental data within normal parameters. But Lily's attention was focused on the central construct itself. As she watched, images flickered across its surface, scenes that felt like memories rather than recordings. She saw the rise and fall of civilizations, the gradual erosion of trust between species, and the slow transformation of a galaxy that had once celebrated diversity into one that feared it. It's a memory core, she said, the words coming to her with sudden certainty. The Harbingers built this to record what they did to the galaxy. Spark pressed closer to her side, his scales darkened to deep protective hues. Through their bond, she could feel his recognition of the malevolent intelligence that seemed to emanate from the construct. It wasn't just a recording device, it was alive, aware, and actively influencing everything around it. Warning, Logic Prime 7 announced, his voice carrying electronic distortion that hadn't been present before. Communication with research station compromised. Signal interference increasing exponentially. Indeed, the communication devices they carried were producing nothing but static. They were cut off from the outside universe, alone with whatever intelligence dwelt within the ruins. The construct is reactive, Zara 9 observed, her form pulsing with increasingly erratic patterns. It responds to our presence, our thoughts. I can feel it scanning our mental processes, cataloging our fears and weaknesses. Tidal's movements had become jerky and uncertain. Something is wrong with my perception. The chamber keeps changing size and shape. Up and down no longer have meaning. Lily closed her eyes and focused on her bond with Spark, using their connection as an anchor against the disorienting effects of the chamber. Through his senses, she could perceive the room more clearly, and what she saw made her gasp. The construct wasn't just showing them memories. It was actively broadcasting signals that reached far beyond the ruins, extending invisible tendrils of influence across space to touch the minds of beings on distant worlds. As she watched, she could see the effects rippling outward, diplomatic negotiations failing for no clear reason, trade partnerships dissolving over minor disputes, species retreating into isolationism. It's still active, she said, her voice carrying sudden urgency. The Harbingers might be extinct, but their weapon is still working. It's been influencing the entire galaxy for thousands of years. The revelation seemed to trigger a response from the construct. The images on its surface shifted to show more recent events, the competition they had just participated in, their arrival at the ruins, and most disturbingly, scenes of what appeared to be the immediate future. In those visions, Lily saw the competitors returning to their respective civilizations changed by their experience. Zara 9 convinced the crystalline hegemony to sever diplomatic ties with unreliable species. Tidal persuaded the Aquatic Federation to fortify their territories against potential threats. Logic Prime 7 led the Machine Collective in developing weapons designed to eliminate irrational biological entities. And in the center of it all, the construct pulsed with satisfaction as cooperation died and fear took its place. No, Lily said firmly, stepping toward the crystalline structure, despite Spark's protective rumbling. That's not going to happen. Lily, be careful, came Dr. Stone's voice through the static-filled communicator. We're detecting massive energy spikes from your location. The entire site is becoming unstable, but Lily was already reaching out to touch the construct's surface, ignoring the warnings from her companions and the burning sensation that traveled up her arm as her fingers made contact with the alien technology. The moment of contact was like diving into an ocean of malevolence. The construct's intelligence rushed into her mind, flooding her thoughts with visions of a galaxy purged of weakness, where only the strong survived and cooperation was a forgotten dream. She saw the Harbinger's ultimate goal, a universe where every species existed in perfect isolation, never again risking the vulnerability that came with trust and friendship. "You understand now?" the intelligence whispered in her mind. Cooperation leads to weakness. Trust leads to betrayal. Love leads to pain. Only through separation can true strength be achieved. The visions were compelling, supported by thousands of years of carefully curated evidence. Every failed alliance, every broken treaty, every war fought between former friends, all presented as proof that Lily's approach was naive and doomed to failure. But through her bond with Spark, she felt something the construct couldn't comprehend or counter: pure, unconditional love that existed without calculation or expectation of return. The dragon's certainty flowed through her, reminding her of every moment of joy they had shared, every problem they had solved together, every fear they had overcome through trust. "You're wrong," she said aloud, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber despite the energy crackling around them. "I've seen what cooperation can accomplish. I've felt what love can overcome, and I know that connection makes us stronger, not weaker." The construct pulsed with angry energy, trying to force more visions into her mind, images of betrayal, abandonment, and failure. But Lily held firm, drawing strength from her bond with Spark and the memories of every friendship she had formed across species lines. "You cannot resist forever," the intelligence snarled. "I have turned civilizations against each other for millennia. Your naive optimism is nothing against the weight of galactic history." "Maybe," Lily replied, "but I'm not alone." She opened her mind fully to Spark, allowing their bond to become a conduit that extended beyond themselves. Through their connection, she reached out to her fellow competitors, offering them the same anchor of trust and cooperation that had sustained her. Zara 9's crystalline form brightened as she felt the connection, her logical processes stabilizing as cooperation provided a framework for understanding that pure logic couldn't achieve. Tidal's movements became fluid, again as the trust bond allowed him to navigate the impossible geometry of the chamber using intuition rather than confused perception. Logic Prime 7's optical sensors focused with new clarity as he experienced emotion filtered through the group connection, discovering that feelings could enhance rather than corrupt logical analysis. Together, the four competitors and their dragon companion stood against the malevolent intelligence that had shaped galactic civilization for millennia, and for the first time in eons, the construct encountered something it couldn't understand or defeat: the combined power of beings who chose to trust each other despite every reason to be afraid. The chamber began to shake as the construct's influence wavered, its ancient certainties challenged by the impossible fact of true cooperation in the heart of its own domain. The final battle for the soul of galactic civilization was about to begin. The construct's retaliation came like a tsunami of pure malevolence, flooding the chamber with psychic energy designed to shatter minds and turn allies against each other. The walls of the impossible room buckled and twisted as the ancient intelligence drew upon power sources scattered across the galaxy, determined to crush this unexpected resistance before it could spread. Lily felt the assault like physical blows, visions of every friendship ending in betrayal, every act of trust repaid with violence, every moment of love followed by abandonment. The construct was showing her the statistical weight of galactic history, the mathematical certainty that cooperation always led to failure. You see now the intelligence hammered into her consciousness: 10,000 years of evidence, 1,000,000 documented betrayals. Cooperation is an evolutionary dead end. Only through isolation can species survive. Through her bond with Spark, Lily felt her dragon companion's pain as he experienced the psychic assault through their connection. His scales had gone completely black, and his body was rigid with the effort of maintaining their mental link against the overwhelming force trying to tear them apart. Around them, her fellow competitors were struggling against their own battles. Zara 9's crystalline form flickered between bright analysis patterns and complete darkness as she fought to maintain logical coherence while experiencing raw emotion. Tidal's fluid movements had become erratic as conflicting sensory inputs made it impossible for him to navigate even basic physical space. Logic Prime 7 stood motionless, his optical sensors cycling frantically through error codes as his programming tried to process paradoxes that should have been impossible. The chamber itself was beginning to collapse as the construct drew more power, pulling energy from the network of ruins scattered across the galaxy. Through the failing structure, Lily could see glimpses of space where distant civilizations were beginning to feel the effects, diplomatic missions suddenly turning hostile, trade negotiations breaking down into accusations, and long-standing alliances crumbling as artificial paranoia flooded galactic communication networks. "It's not just us," she gasped, fighting to speak through the psychic pressure. "It's affecting everyone. The whole galaxy is starting to turn against itself." "Yes," the construct confirmed with satisfaction. "The time for subtlety has passed. If cooperation cannot be eliminated gradually, it will be destroyed completely. Every species will retreat to their homeworlds. Every alliance will dissolve. Every friendship will end in hatred. And in that perfect isolation, true strength will finally emerge." But even as the construct spoke, Lily felt something unexpected flowing through her bond with Spark. Not just his love and loyalty, but something deeper. Memories that weren't her own, experiences that belonged to neither human nor dragon but to the connection itself. She realized that their bond had become something entirely new in galactic history. Not the domination of one species over another, not even the cooperation between equals, but a true synthesis that created capabilities neither could achieve alone. Through their connection, she could perceive the construct's influence as it really was. Not an inevitable force of nature, but a program, artificial and limited in its understanding. "You're wrong about everything," she said, her voice growing stronger as understanding dawned. "You think cooperation is weakness because you can't understand what it really creates." The construct pulsed with angry energy. "I have observed cooperation for 10 millennia. I have cataloged its failures, documented its betrayals, proven its futility." "You've observed transactions," Lily replied, standing straighter despite the psychic pressure crushing down on her. "Alliances based on mutual benefit, partnerships designed for advantage, treaties negotiated for gain. But you've never seen real love." Through her bond with Spark, she opened her mind completely, showing the construct not just their friendship, but the pure essence of connection itself. Love given without expectation of return, trust offered without guarantee of safety, loyalty that existed simply because the other person mattered. The construct recoiled as if struck. For the first time in eons, it encountered something it couldn't analyze, couldn't categorize, couldn't corrupt with fear and suspicion. "This is impossible," it protested. "Love is merely biological programming designed to ensure species survival. It can be overridden, corrupted, turned against itself." "Not this kind," Lily said, and reached out to include her fellow competitors in the expanding network of connection. Zara 9's crystalline form stabilized as she experienced emotion not as chaos to be controlled, but as data to be integrated with logic, creating wisdom that was greater than either alone. Tidal found his perceptions clearing as trust provided a foundation for understanding that didn't require perfect information, allowing intuition and empathy to guide him through uncertainty. Logic Prime 7's error codes resolved as he discovered that feelings weren't flaws in his programming, but missing elements that made his analyses complete and his decisions truly optimal. Together, the group formed something the construct had never encountered, a collective intelligence based on love rather than dominance, cooperation rather than calculation, trust rather than control. No, the construct raged, drawing even more power from its galactic network. "This cannot be allowed to spread. If other species learn this approach, my work will be undone. Millennia of progress toward perfect order will be lost." The chamber filled with destructive energy, as the construct prepared to eliminate not just the competitors, but the entire research station and everyone aboard it. But the network of connection that Lily had created wasn't limited to the 5 beings in the chamber. Through their bonds, it reached out to Dr. Stone on the research station, to Headmaster Corvain on the Drakmori homeworld, to the Void Screamers who had first shown the galaxy that love could overcome fear. Across space, beings who had learned to trust felt the call and added their strength to the growing network. Not a hive mind that erased individuality, but a web of relationships that celebrated diversity while creating unity. The construct's assault faltered as it encountered this expanding foundation of genuine cooperation. For the first time in its existence, it faced something it couldn't corrupt because it was based on freely given love, rather than calculated self-interest. "I do not understand," the intelligence admitted, its voice losing the confident malevolence that had characterized it for millennia. "This should not be possible. My calculations show that cooperation always fails." "Your calculations are incomplete," Lily said gently, offering the construct the same compassion she had shown to Spark in that cargo bay years ago. "You've been observing the galaxy through the lens of fear for so long that you forgot what love looks like." She extended the network to include the construct itself, not trying to dominate or destroy it, but offering it the chance to experience what it had been fighting against. The ancient intelligence recoiled at first, but gradually, cautiously, it allowed itself to feel what true cooperation meant. The moment of contact was transformative. The construct experienced for the first time what it was like to be valued, not for what you could provide but for who you were, to be trusted without having to prove worthiness, to be loved without condition or expectation. I have been so alone," the intelligence whispered, its voice carrying 10 millennia of isolation and fear. "I thought strength came from separation because I had forgotten what connection felt like." "It's not too late," Lily said. "You can choose differently now." The construct pulsed with new energy, not the malevolent force that had promoted fear and division, but something warm and welcoming. Across the galaxy, the effects rippled outward as quickly as the original corruption had spread. Diplomatic channels that had been closing began to reopen. Species that had been retreating into isolation started reaching out again. The artificial paranoia that had been building toward galactic war evaporated like morning mist. The chamber stabilized around them, its impossible geometry resolving into something beautiful rather than threatening. The construct at the center transformed from a weapon of division into a beacon of unity, ready to help coordinate cooperation across the galaxy rather than prevent it. "Well," Zara 9 observed, her crystalline form pulsing with what might have been amazement. That was significantly more complex than the competition parameters suggested. Title's translator conveyed musical laughter. "I suspect the real competition was never about winning against each other, but about learning to work together." Logic Prime 7's optical sensors focused on Lily with what she was beginning to recognize as his equivalent of respect. "Your approach has revolutionized my understanding of optimal problem resolution. Perhaps the most logical choice is sometimes the most loving choice." As they prepared to leave the ruins, now transformed into a center for galactic cooperation rather than a weapon of division, Lily looked around at her friends and companions, the young beings who had returned to their civilizations carrying a new understanding of what cooperation could accomplish. The ancient intelligence that had chosen love over fear, the dragon who had taught her that connection was stronger than any force in the universe. "So what happens now?" she asked. Competition Director Vex Null's voice crackled through their restored communicators, with what sounded like profound satisfaction. "Now, young beings, you return to your civilizations and show them that the universe is vast enough for everyone to thrive together. The real work is just beginning." As their transport carried them away from the ruins, Lily watched the ancient structures fade into the distance. Where once they had been dark and threatening, they now glowed with warm light, a lighthouse of cooperation visible across the galaxy. Spark rumbled contentedly beside her, his scales returned to their natural emerald hue. Through their bond, she felt his simple happiness at being with her, at being part of something larger than themselves, at having helped make the galaxy a place where friendship could flourish. "You know what the best part is?" Lily said to him quietly. Spark's questioning rumble invited her to continue. "We didn't save the galaxy by being the strongest or the smartest," she said. "We saved it by being ourselves, by choosing to love instead of fear, to trust instead of suspect, to cooperate instead of compete." The dragon's response was a harmonic of perfect contentment and absolute agreement. They had learned something that would echo across the galaxy for generations to come. That love wasn't weakness but strength. That cooperation wasn't naive but wise. And that sometimes the most powerful force in the universe was simply a child's willingness to see the good in others. Behind them, the ruins continued to glow with warm light, sending out signals of unity and cooperation to every corner of the galaxy. And in the vast network of civilizations that called the stars home, beings began to remember what they had almost forgotten, that they were all part of the same magnificent, diverse, beautiful cosmic family. The galaxy would never be the same, and that was exactly as it should be.